and it turns out that they let slip that they buried their kid, Thomas, outside, and apparently they were afraid the rain would wash up his body or some other horseshit. The kid was like 6 years old. He was attacked by a dog and they never told the cops. Just buried him like he was a fucking family pet or something. My dad was flipping his shit, and rightfully so, cause we, live in the 21st century and all that. So our relatives say they sort it out by tomorrow. My parents tell me and my sister to stay in the same room as they were during the night, and we do. None of us really suspected that they killed Thomas or anything, since they were all really peaceful. They didn't even own any guns from aside this one old-timey double-barreled shotgun they had on the mantle. Nonetheless, we were creeped the fuck out, and intended to tell the cops in the morning once we got to town. So it was like 3 in the morning. I couldn't sleep. The power had gone out for the 5th time or so, and I'm not able to charge my dead phone. Worst part is, I could see Thomas's little grave right outside the window. Little cross on it and everything. I assumed the kid couldn't have been buried deep at all since they were worried about him washing up out of the grave. So I was fixated on it. Kept being drawn out looking out the window. And then I saw the worst fucking thing in my life. Something was creeping through the trees towards the house. I stared it for a while, but I couldn't get a good look at it since it was raining and the brush outside was so thick. For a few minutes I assumed it was 2 really pale horses kinda ambling towards the woods side by side. But then it walked into the moonlight, and I saw that it was all one thing, like kind of a human torso but wider. It finally stepped into full view, and I saw it had something like 6 legs, kind of somewhere between a beetle's legs and a horse's legs. 2 arms, right where someone would normally have them, but they were about half a foot longer than any normal man's arms. It had a bald head, but the face looked like some sort of fucking bizarre masquerade ball kind of mask. This fucking thing clenched up, furrowed forehead and a nose that sort of looked like a crow's or a raven's beak. It didn't have eyes either, just like these 2 depressions where the eyes would have been. It seemed like it had a human mouth under the proboscis. What strikes me odd is that it really seemed to have a penis too, like right on the abdomen where a normal man's dick would be. The thing sort of moved gracefully and made these soft thumping sounds when it moved. It must have been like 7 or 8 feet tall or something, but it sounded like it only weighed just a little over 150 pounds or so. It started walking towards Thomas's grave, and I finally snapped out of what trance I was in and just screamed. My mom is the first one to wake up, and I tell her to look at the window. She rushes over but doesn't really seem to understand what she's looking at. For a minute though, the thing bends down and starts pawing the ground with its bare hands. My dad and Jasper rush in, and Jasper just fucking loses his shit. Screams like a little girl, runs back out of the room yelling to his father, "It's outside, it came back, and it's outside." I look back and see the thing is furiously digging at the ground, kicking up huge amounts of dirt. I hear these sounds of feet running around the house. I think they were looking for the shotgun. The thing reaches to the hole and grabs what I assume to be Thomas's body by the leg in one hand. The thing kind of gallops back into the woods, snapping all these branches and shit, and then that's when we all hear it. A kid's crying. The sound of a child sobbing and crying from the direction that the thing went off in. We left as soon as the rain let up at like 5 AM or something. I don't think we even told anyone at the house. We just drove straight to Ranson, only stopping for gas. No one said a word to each other. My family refuses to speak of what happened. I tried to bring it up once, just to make it sure it was real. My dad told me to shut the fuck up. So I did. I typed this up about 3 weeks after it happened, but just saved it on a notepad file and left it alone. Never mentioned to any of my friends or anything. I just tried to erase it from my memory by getting absolutely fucking drunk whenever my thoughts lingered upon it. And it almost worked until yesterday. You see, I work at this gas station in Ranson from 8 PM to 3 AM. I work the register. I keep the place pretty clean, you know. I take out the trash, and yesterday, when I was bringing out the trash bags over to the back of the building for the dude in the morning to take care of it, I heard what I assumed to be some fucking junkie fucking around in the dumpsters. I yelled out a couple of times whoever was behind the dumpsters to get the hell out before I was calling the cops. I suddenly heard these footsteps. That familiar soft thumping sound, you know. Hooves or whatever the hell they were, you know. I turned right around and to the back of the store and hid behind the counter. I looked over outside the security monitor to see some kind of movement from just off the screen. Something huge was casting a shadow and moving. I caught a glimpse of you know, I don't know, an elbow or something, a pale limb, darting in and out of the wheel. It had to be the same thing. I waited for it to leave, and after a while, it did. After that, I woke up around 6 AM in the morning to my manager giving me this weird fucking look, you know, like I'm a fucking addict or something, you know. I went home and typed the rest of this up. And that's about it. Thanks for listening, guys. I really hope that you enjoyed this narration. And I just wanted to say that I wanted to do these, you know, classic stories with my real voice, you know. I am not gonna do all the 4chan videos with this voice, but I also have some creepypasta stories that are coming out very soon. And with those videos, I'm gonna use my real voice. So, be tuned, you know, subscribe, like, and most importantly, share your feelings and comment on my videos. Thank you.
Can we get an urban legend thread? I saw one about a month ago and really enjoyed it. I'll post about 3 of my own, then the ones I saved from that thread. Feel free to contribute, even if they aren't too spoopy. So the scariest one I remember was probably the Ant-Man. I won't say where I'm from because it's not important and I come on 4chan to be anonymous. Years ago, a mad scientist lives on the outskirts of town near the woods, because obviously there's a mad scientist. He does all these weird experiments involving lots of animals but mainly with ants. The story went that nobody really knew where his house was, but sometimes you'd feel bites on your feet, look down and see yourself getting swarmed by ants. That's how you knew you were getting close. Ants were supposed to get bigger and bigger the closer you got. Some stories even say that there would be ants near the house the size of rats. One story says a woman heard her baby crying one night and went into the room to find these rat-sized ants trying to drag her baby away. My favorite one was about a giant ant he made that lives underground. Whenever we'd see birds flying away from something in the woods, my brother would tell me it was the giant ant walking around. Anyway, one day some kids go looking for his house and actually find it. It looks abandoned, but it's definitely his cause it's filled with old lab equipment. As they make their way around, they eventually find a bedroom. There's a bed covered in ants with somebody sleeping under it. One boy goes to pull back the sheets to see if it's the scientist. Pulls back the blanket and sees a man's body with a giant black ant's head. Body is humanoid but with a type of carapace instead of skin. Black and hard like armor with little spiky claws for fingers. Boys freak out and run home. Tell parents but nobody believes them. They each go to bed that night but one by one they wake up because they can feel things crawling over their bodies. They rip off their blankets to see themselves covered in millions of ants. They look up just in time to see the silhouette of a giant ant with a human body and huge glistening pincers crawling on their ceiling before it skitters down the wall and attacks them. This last part was normally accompanied by the storyteller jumping and grabbing one of us to see if we would scream.
This is one of the weirder ones my dad used to tell me. Be my dad. Be at the shops buying groceries. Feel a sudden heat wave, like somebody just opened an oven door in front of his face. Dissipates quickly. He looks around, other shoppers are also whirling about confused. He later found out that everybody in about a 5 kilometers radius felt it. I'm pretty sure I remember feeling it too, but I was pretty young, so that's the only part of the story I remember. Dad forgets about it, but later that day he gets a call from his work friend. His kid is missing. Apparently a whole classroom full of kids are missing. As the story goes, the classroom was at the direct center of the heat wave. Every other kid in the school is still there and perfectly fine, but this one classroom is completely empty. A bunch of locals, including my dad, go out to search for the kids. Teacher was out of the room for like 2 minutes, felt the heat wave and went back shortly after only to find the room empty. We're talking like 20 kids just gone. Adults are searching around the school. Search eventually gets extended to local park and woods. My brother says he remembers this part cause mom told him to take care of us younger siblings. Kids are nowhere to be found. Parents of the missing children are hysterical. Finally somebody comes running out the school. Says the kids are back in the classroom. People start making their way back to the school as they find out. Kids are all in the classroom. Completely fine but obviously very shaken and silent. All just sitting at the desks like nothing happened. Kids are questioned but none of them seem to remember much. One time my dad told me a kid said he remembered seeing a shining slime. He told the story that wasn't a part of it. Years pass and eventually one kid, now in their 20s, kills themselves. Another kills themselves and then another. Around 7 to 8 all commit suicide within about a year of the first one. I actually remember reading about it after the 7th or 8th death in the paper. They talked about something called the Werther effect and basically said that this happens when people in small, close-knit communities experience a suicide. Sometimes called a cluster suicide. I know that part happened, but I'm not sure about the classroom stuff cause the paper never mentioned any of that and I only heard about that part from my dad. Always wanted to find one of the remaining kids and ask about that day, but I don't